have to cry no more. And we won't have to cry no more.
What's up, guys? Eat, Sleep, Train podcast number 2, and why? Yeah, but this is pretty much. I want people to get an accurate depiction of how you actually are day to day.
Do we need to sound check these levels at all?
No,
Sounds
we're
good.
sounding good.
Because I was way
Right,
louder than everyone on the last one. I don't know why. Like significantly louder.
When in the last?
No.
What do you? I'm going to do that a few times today.
Hi, my name is Murray Ballin, and I like to ask really long questions that have lots of sentences that are never completed.
That trail off literally and figuratively.
All right. Anyway, let's get this moving.
Oh, that hurts.
We're on the clock today. So, topic for today is how to train when you can't train. Particularly relevant given that we're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse and jiu-jitsu gyms are all shut down, not just in this country but around the world. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of content that people are putting out, but the reality is that sooner or later everyone's going to get pretty bored of doing a hip escape in their living room, on the rug. So we're here to discuss with you what our thoughts are on how to get the most out of a situation like this. It's not just relevant to when there's a worldwide pandemic, but there's times when you're injured or sick or something else takes you off the mat. Maybe you've been unfortunate enough to need a surgery and you've got a long recovery period. But there's times when you can't train physically. So what do we do in order to make the most out of that period? So when we come back on the mat, we're better at jiu-jitsu in some way. Maybe not physically, maybe not the movement patterns, maybe not those the techniques are not as sharp as they were, but something's better. So what are your thoughts? Linc, we'll start with you because you're on the left.
I am indeed a little bit of a lefty, and I'm sitting on the left. Firstly, I just want to say this one piece of advice I give to a lot of my students. In the normal space of your training life, don't take unnecessary days off. Don't have a day off because you can't be bothered, or you went home and got on the couch and didn't get up in time, or you just feel like a day off, because there will be times in your life where you're injured, where you're sick, where you have a family event, a work event, or a worldwide pandemic where you can't train. And when you add all those little days off that you take off that you didn't need to take off to the days that you have to take off because of, #life, because of life, you end up taking a lot of days off. So something I learned the hard way, don't take days off you don't need to take off. If you're tired, go to training, train slow, practice defense, whatever, but don't just stay home for the hell of staying home. That's the first point I would make. Because if you've done that, now you're faced with many, many days off when you add those with the current situation.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's 3 pillars, and then I guess we could elaborate on those pillars and add others. Your dog likes me better than you, by the way.
Apparently. She does. Traitor.
The first one for me is keep your head in the game. So
100%.
watch jiu-jitsu. And there's only so many instructionals and analysis you can watch, or even matches. But if you go on YouTube or you get a Flow Grappling membership, there's many lifestyle documentaries that follow people through a camp, or documentaries that tell the story of the Marcelos and the Hodges, etc. And when you get bored of the technique because you can't practice it, they're really good to keep you G'd up and dialed in with the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, I find.
Yeah.
I can't always just sit and watch Danaher talk in fancy elaborate terms for hours and hours on end, but I can go watch, a 3-part documentary on Ted a Day or something like that.
Yeah.
That gets me G'd for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's a good documentary.
Yeah.
We'll link it up.
Yeah, anyway, we'll link it up.
When we say we'll link it up, Rigel and Alex will link it up.
Someone else will link it up, because I can barely use an iPhone, let alone this kind of stuff these boys do. So for me, pillar 1 would be keep the head in the game, and I guess we can discuss how. Mm-hmm. Pillar 2 would be use the time to rehab injuries and improve your mobility, strength, and conditioning.
Yep.
Which is pretty easy because there's not much else you can do, really. You can work on mobility, work at home. You can go for a run or a bike ride or lift some weights if you're fortunate enough to have a weight set up. So I think that's important. And then number 3, if you can keep moving through jiu-jitsu-esque movements, hip escapes and whatever it is that you want to do, pick up an instructional or just practice the general stuff that your coach gets you to do in class, etc. For me, I feel like they're probably the 3 pillars. So keep your head in the game, improve yourself physically, and if you can, keep moving.
It's pretty good, pretty succinct.
Just close the
Muzz,
podcast now.
Beat that.
Beat that. Ooh. Okay, so I'm sure everyone's experienced the busier you are, the more you tend to be able to fit in.
Yep.
And
To a
or the
de-
more
to a degree.
or the more you try to fit in.
Until it gets so much that you just stop trying to do anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just
You just
generally, if you have stuff to do, there's structure, and it's easier to build more structure around that structure. And I guess what I'm getting at is that when everything's stopped and there is nothing to do, as we discussed recently, jiu-jitsu seems to be the trigger for us to want to do extra work. So what it highlights to me is that, obviously we get massive significance from it and put a huge amount of importance on it. And so it highlights the need for, I think, for at least me, I won't speak for you, but balance. And even when jiu-jitsu becomes a part of normal life again, to make sure that it's in a balanced perspective so that the other things that Linc is discussing actually are part of our normal life.
Yeah.
Because so that when you're injured or sick or family life changes, whatever it may be that pulls you away from it again, you just don't go, oh, well, there's no jiu-jitsu, so whatever.
I'll just be fat.
I'll do whatever. I won't do anything.
Yep. Fitness, not fatness.
Yeah. So, I think there'll be a lot of people there that need ways, methods and or ways to kind of help them bootstrap themselves back into activity.
Yep.
Or back into it's all very well and good having the 3 pillars are awesome. I like all of them, and it'd be really cool to do all of them, but how do you actually get yourself to do that when you don't have the glue or the stimulus that makes you want to do that normally? Because normally grappling, when you're training, it's not hard to be motivated to go and check out some videos because you just got your ass handed to you for an hour and you're like, you want to get better. That makes sense. But when you're not getting that stimulus, yeah.
And that goes to discipline is what we're talking about there.
Exactly.
That's what we need.
Routine, structure, and discipline.
Yeah. So the thing that I find the most important about understanding what to do when you can't physically get on the mat is being really clear about where the gains can be made. So it doesn't really matter if you're off the mat for 2 weeks or 2 months, 6 months, whatever it might be. It's easier if you've been training longer because your physical skill set's not going to get as rusty. You know more jiu-jitsu, you've got more of a foundation, so it's easier to work on the theoretical sides of jiu-jitsu. So one of the things that we've been encouraging the students to do at Dominance is to focus really heavily on increasing their understanding and their knowledge of the concepts that work through jiu-jitsu, and then understanding strategy, which is something that's quite often overlooked. And because strategy is the kind of thing that's really, really hard to study when you're in fight. So if you're actually if you're in a role on the mat with a partner, it's very, very difficult to be thinking about strategy if the fight is relatively close and you're under the pump.
Yep.
If you're significantly better than your partner, it's really easy to just kick back and be like, I think 5 moves ahead in 5 different directions, and what if I do this? Because there's not much consequence. So you can kind of keep the fight corralled into the space that you want it to be, for lack of a better phrase. Most of the time, I think that the easiest way to start to get better at strategy is to be on the outside of matches and looking at it, whether it's reviewing your own fight footage or watching someone roll that you roll with regularly, roll with someone else to see, that's what he's doing. Like, whenever he catches me in this thing, that's the grip that sets it all up. Or it might be watching 2 of the best guys in the world compete. One of the best examples that I think that's floating around that's free at the moment is Keenan breaking down his fight with Marigali, and it's fantastic because he stops at all those moments that this is what I was thinking, and this is why I did this. Again, Keenan's a very cerebral grappler. He's I wouldn't refer to him as a really dynamic and physical jiu-jitsu guy. He's much more about the mental game. So it's really interesting seeing him break it down. So when we can't actually get on the mat and train physically, I think they're the areas that we should be working on, in addition to what we've already discussed, which was you've got to keep your head in the game. And you definitely need to stay active because you don't want to come back just being a slob. And there's plenty of stuff that you can do. One of the things that, for me, that came up after we sat down and spoke with John in the first podcast was getting a better idea of the conditioning elements that I need to bring in, creating those habits now and then keeping them there when we get back.
Yeah.
Which will be discipline because we can jump back on the mat like, sweet, I can train twice a day again now just doing jiu-jitsu. But I've got to make sure I keep that base conditioning training there. But yes, the number one thing that you can, I think, get really good gains out of that doesn't require you to physically be on the mat is upgrading your conceptual understanding of jiu-jitsu and upgrading your understanding of strategy. And they're two separate things. Concepts will be a mechanical idea that runs through a number of different techniques. And strategy is the way that all your techniques fit together in the context of an entire wrestle. Because a lot of time we just wrestle in single techniques. Like, all right, I'm going to get to guard and I'm going to try to do my single X sweep. And if the guy counters that, then I'm just going to do this. And it's quite single. And we might have a flow, but they don't necessarily sit in a bigger context of taking into consideration my partner's skill, his game, maybe what's happening on the scoreboard or the rule set that we're in. And I think that actually takes quite a bit more getting good at than people really think it does. And a lot of time they don't even consciously do it. It just happens, maybe it happens organically through time. You see some guys out there that when they're competing at a high level, it doesn't even really seem like they fight strategically. And I think maybe Merigali is an example of that. Not totally devoid of strategy, but even in that match, he commented when he was asked by one of the other guys out there about the match, he's like, no, I was just trying to submit him. He's like, I know if I could have, if I played more strategically, I could have beaten him. He's like, I just wanted to submit him. Now, that might have been a conscious choice for that match, but some guys have that style more than others.
I'll touch on a couple of points, but he recently had a one-on-one on Flow where he spoke about his submission-only mentality and the number of matches he's lost because of that. And
I think Cron
he's
highlighted
this is
how that strategy works for you too.
Referring to Merigali, and Merigali's feeling that that's what jiu-jitsu is about, but he understands he needs to think a little bit more strategically if he wants to win big tournaments, because you can't always tap someone of a similar level inside 10 minutes or 8 minutes or 6 minutes.
It's been interesting to watch Galvao change that a little bit, I think, throughout his career. He was very, hunting their sub all the time, but if his ADC, his super fights anyway, maybe it's the caliber, but he looks the caliber of the opponent, but he looks incredibly strategic.
He is. It's also rule set too, I think, in the specific case of ADCC. I think that leans you a little bit more toward that direction because you're going to end up losing because of a minus point or judges' decisions a little bit easier than something like IBJJF with his advantages.
Yeah.
And something like an advantage can make things snowball a bit more. But Merigali is one of the best guys out there. And even he's sitting back and being able to critique himself and going, man, I got to change this, otherwise I'm going to be losing key matches. We'll try to link that up if we can.
Yeah, we should. I think when it comes to strategy and the term strategy, there's a stigma attached to it in some ways that comes from the Merigali mentality. And I think that mentality is jiu-jitsu is about the submission, which it is. But the stigma attached to strategy is misunderstanding what the term strategy means and viewing it like a binary. Some people are like, oh, you only go for the sub or you're strategic, so you're sitting 50-50 and aim to win by an advantage. And that's not what being strategic is. No. So, for example, if I want to submit you, Dave, I'm probably going to chase your legs
and foot like me.
Yeah. If I want to submit Murray, I'm probably going to try to get him to the close guard and look to triangle him, because I understand the strengths that you guys play. I also understand that if I play that strategy, while I might not get the submission, even though that's the primary aim, I can control the match via that position and still score. So basically, if I put it in another context without using you guys, because that doesn't, whatever. If I put it in another context, when I compete, my general strategy here I go, I'm doing myself, is to look to get to the closed guard. I know if I get to the closed guard with almost anyone in my division, okay, I'm not competing against Bushesha, obviously, I'm competing against other master black belts. I'm most likely going to win because my guard is incredibly hard to pass. And I can then take my time pulling their game to pieces, making sure they can't mount offense on me. That's always my number one goal. Control them so they can't attack me.
Yep.
Which will then lead to them either giving me the opportunity through them getting frustrated and making a mistake, or me finding the opportunity, leading them to the opportunity to sub. But I also know that if I can't sub, chances are I can sweep. I can usually sweep from guard. But of course, I'm always hunting for the sub. That doesn't mean that I'm going out to pull guard and win by an advantage. Although sometimes that happens because the other guy's good too. You know, like I'm a black belt, he's a black belt. They're not bad.
Your first job is to win. That's your first job.
I feel like, true, but I feel like my first job, strategy-wise, and people can disagree, but my first job is to shut the other person down so they can't win. My first job is to make sure you can't pass my guard and you can't submit me. Once I do that, guess who can do the submitting?
Yeah, by that, I agree. I mean, when I say your first job is to win, I mean your first job is make sure you win the match. Don't make it so the only choice is you either submit the guy or you lose.
Yeah, because I mean we know jiu-jitsu is about control, right? And if we look back to the whole real fight, this, that, and the other, you know, you don't want to go swinging for the fences and give each other a puncher's chance, right? I want to shut the guy down so that he has no chance and I have all the chance. Yeah. What do the Navy SEALs say? If you're in a fair fight, then you didn't plan.
Yep.
You don't want to be in a fair fight. You want to make sure you put yourself in a position where you've got all the cards and they don't have many.
Yeah, I agree.
Makes you wonder why then more people don't go straight to closed guard because
it's very hard. Because most people understand if you get stuck in a good guy's closed guard,
you're screwed.
Especially if he's tall. They don't even have to be that good. If they're tall, within reason, you're screwed. Well, it's very difficult, especially if it's a 6-minute match or a 5-minute match.
If you're winning the match and you get to closed guard, done. It's very, very difficult. If you're the guy that's been put in closed guard and you're down, even if it's an advantage, it's very, very hard to win the match from there. Because the guy on bottom knows the strengths of closed guard. The other reason why people don't go to closed guard more often, I think, as well, is because they don't know how to play it well. It's a guard that works well.
It's a stalling position, not so much I'm here to take charge of the match.
Well, let's be careful about that.
Top or bottom you're referring to?
I'm saying for the people that aren't that good at it.
Yeah.
They've gone there because they're like, holy shit, I need to shut this thing down for a moment, but I don't really know what to do.
And it's a very smart place to go to. Closed guard and half guard have something very similar in common. Have something.
Yeah, that'll do.
They closed guard and half guard have something in common, which is really important, which is in both those guards, your legs are shut around your partner. Now, in half guard, it's your legs are shut around their leg, but in closed guard, your legs are shut around their waist. They're both very, very slow guards. So if you're inexperienced and there's a scramble happening, it's actually a really smart place to get to. You slow the fight down enough to be able to figure out what the hell to do.
Can I just, so that we get back on topic of mindset, because while strategy is part of that, for me, sitting at home, you guys sound like you've, it's mainly you at the moment, Linc, but I know you have too, like you've got your competition strategy sorted.
Don't ever go to this guy's closed guard. If you do, just give it up.
I guess what I'm saying, if you are sitting at home during this time or you're injured or whatever and you can't train, give some concrete steps for how someone is meant to come up with their own strategy, like analyze how they should be analyzing videos to check what other people's strategies are.
Can we just little asterisks there? What skill level are we talking about here? Let's make an assumption that
let's say blue belt up.
Okay, easy.
Yeah, because I guess white belt. Let's start. What could white belts do? I think
just map the positions, maybe.
Yeah,
100%.
map the positions and just. Maybe rather than being too concerned about devising their own strategy, maybe spend a bit of time trying to learn the strategies that are used by various people. In particular, look at someone of similar body type.
100%.
Yeah, like I looked at Nicholas Marigali for his, Dale X and his collar sleeve. I'm not going to. Galval's amazing and I watch him, but I don't have a lot in common with Galval. Nothing.
No, I think you're raising a really interesting point too, which is a lot of people will through
Just big traps.
Yeah, nothing.
A lot of people through the organic process of training will come across the techniques that work well for their athletic attributes, their body type. But you can speed that process up by just identifying who's got a similar body type to me, and it might be about flexibility, it might be about limb length, it might be about your weight and height, all that sort of stuff, how it combines. But there's someone out there, there's a bunch of people out there that are already that body type. Just find those guys, look at what game they're doing, because they're probably, if they're succeeding at a really high level, then they've probably already narrowed the field down. It's not going to be the only techniques that work, but you know that if this guy's doing those techniques at the highest level against the best guys, then those ones at least do work. But yeah, you can definitely speed the process up. And I think what you're doing there is going, yeah, Andre Gaval's great, but he's not my body type. And while some of his stuff might work, you're probably better off looking at the guys that are your body type.
I mean, you can still take from him mindset.
Yeah.
And obviously being a coach, I need to understand the technical advantages and disadvantages to all body type in order to be able to coach my guys, because they're not all 6'2" and mainly legs. But his style of jiu-jitsu is not going to help me a bunch compared to someone like Marigali or such.
So White Belts was saying, just to understand the basic positions, what we refer to as the roadmap. So this is mount. If I'm on top, these are my main goals. If I'm underneath, these are my main goals. You get your do's and don'ts from all the main positions. If you're a blue belt, though, what are you doing to sort out your competition strategy?
I think there's a couple of, I think there's two separate things for me. One is where you're naturally most comfortable, most effective at, which positions. That's one. Mm-hmm. So that's like your personal strategy. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you would know that mostly by blue.
And generally, I don't think that needs to be forced. It's organic. Yep. Most people by blue belt will start to be successful with particular positions and start to have a realization that, hey, this group of positions works best for me. And there's often I feel like it's transverse top to bottom. You'll have, so if we look at long guys, for example, they tend to be guard players.
Yep.
But either close guard or long range guards.
Yep.
Not many tall guys. Stock is an exception. Not many tall guys are going to play as much butterfly or full X, for example. Yet there's always exceptions to the rule. And then if you flip them, most tall guys aren't going to play over-under or that style of pass. They're more likely to play Toriander, leg drag, knee-through style of passing.
Yep.
So I think you'll find that. That'll come. But I think the other side, competition strategy is not just where am I best at.
No.
Competition, like you said before, it's understanding the rules, understanding opponents' games, being able to look at someone across the mat and go, this guy's a little tank. This guy's either going to take me down and go on top, or he's going to play half guard.
Yep.
So how do I nullify this little tank's preferred game?
Yep.
And it's a generalization unless you know the guy, but 80% of the time it's going to be correct.
Yep.
And you go to a tournament, you go to Masters Worlds, there's 7,000 competitors. You can't, I had 58 or whatever in my division last year. I can't scout everyone. It's not possible.
No.
And then understanding, the actual game of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the points,
depending on what comp.
What I need to do, what part of, what part of the match.
Because what you need to do in the first minute is very different to what you need to do in the last minute.
And all of that, which one of the, even within that, both of those depend on what happens in the middle minutes.
Yep.
So that can be very different. So
even individually, if we're in a match and you're looking at the different time frames, depending on how our partner plays will have a big impact on how we need to play as well, because we've both run into situations where someone's got an advantage on the scoreboard and then a short match, it might be a 5 or 6 minute match and maybe there's only 3 minutes left and all they're doing is trying to stall out.
Yeah.
That's very different to if the person's active.
That's happened to me many, many times and that's another feature I find of body type.
Yeah.
I find that the short, stocky guys, at least in my division, if they get up an advantage, it's on the knees, it's ass back, and it's going.
Yep.
So 2 seconds. So just as an example of my strategy analysis is to identify that area okay, what are my tools when this happens, which happens regularly enough? So there's 1 minute left, I'm down an advantage, and he's on his knees, ass back, super low, elbows in. Okay, what do I need to look at? I need to look at open the guard, I need to look at collar drags, I need to look at arm drags, I need to look at collar sleeve to the omoplata to at least try to get him to roll. So that's where I mean, like, you've got one part of the strategy, but then you've got competition strategy and understanding what you need to do in each moment of the match against each person, which is often very variable, and maybe that's too advanced for blue belts, what I'm saying now.
I think right now for blue belts, the focus is on just how do you actually win that immediate match that you're in, and not worry too much about who's next, how much rest do you have, how many fights do you have in a day, all that sort of stuff. Just white belt is just map out the actual positions, like understand what's good and what's bad. Blue belts, you should have a pretty good idea of most of your strong positions, certainly not the details, but at least where you want to be, and a broader strategy that suits your game. And then as you start to move up, particularly as you've got the kind of experience and the years that we have, you can go, all right, I got 6 matches today. I've got probably going to have a bit of a gap here between my weight class and the open, so I'll have a bit more recovery. The first match, I want to use that as a bit more of a warm-up, so I'm going to go, to give you an example of one of the things that I recognized about myself that impacted really heavily about strategy was I realized really early on that if I came out really hard at the block, and being a guard player, I'd quite often gas my legs out. So fairly early on in competing...
Me and Mo's both just looked at your legs and were like, yeah.
Yeah, of course. So fairly early on, I identified, though, that at the start of the match, we're both really adrenalized. Like, everyone's just, particularly that first match, you're just going 110%. So the person that you're wrestling feels superhuman for that first minute. So then I developed really quickly the strategy of I'm going to get to close guard, and I'm not actually going to try to win in the first minute. All I'm going to try to do is break posture and stop them opening my legs. And I'm going to do that with timing. And then I'd feel them go from being like superhuman to like, I just feel that kind of softening happen. I'm like, all right, now it's time to actually do some jiu-jitsu. And it changed things really dramatically. I didn't get gassed. And I also picked up a bunch of free subs in that first minute because they were going nuts trying to get something happening. And they would give me a triangle or a normal plata or a sweep or whatever it might be. But that changed things really dramatically for me, just to understand that first minute. But there's guys out there that do like to go really hard in that first minute. But that's their style in the gym as well.
I tend to do pretty hard first minute.
Yeah.
See how it goes.
I think, and there's pros and cons for both. There's nothing wrong with it, but that just suits me in the way I like to play.
It often goes well, and sometimes it does not.
Yeah.
Muzz is dying to say something. We just cut him out for the last.
No, I'm just.
But I do have something to say on that, so we'll come back to that.
I'm someone that likes very clear steps and instructions for things, and so like if
I have some.
Okay, cool. So in terms of
Now on just go and then I'll go.
just review your 3 pillars. 1,
I'm still on the first pillar,
which is keeping your head in the game.
which comes into everything.
Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of that, when you're like, obviously, it starts to touch on people needing to utilize things like visualization, which they may think they've never actually done, but
Everyone
do
does
all the time, but actually putting it into practice. I mean, for me, a lot of what you guys are talking about, like if I'm going to do what you guys are talking about, I don't necessarily, it doesn't tend to matter to me personally if the person is my size. I just pick someone that I find exciting to watch because it inspires me to learn from them. And
I would argue against that.
Generally, that means, having said that, they've all been within 10 kilos of my weight, not below. It's 77 to 88.
I would argue against that because your game is very clearly, especially from the bottom, based around someone who's not that dissimilar in build to you.
Yep.
That's because, are we talking who, like
MJ?
Yeah, that's because I was doing it already, but then he bursts onto the scene and I'm like, wow.
So basically he stole you.
I should, yeah, absolutely. I should work on that more. And so religiously watched his matches and instructionals, and would just I wonder how, I'm sure many people do it, but the same technique, okay, arm drag. And I watch it like God knows how many times until I felt like I'd seen everything, visualizing it and trying to work on it myself in my head, and then trying to, obviously had the opportunity to implement it in grappling as well. But yeah, I just, maybe some more steps as to how you would do that now, not being able to actually actively practice it.
Maybe I'll leave that part to Dave. I'm just going to go back one step about identifying your own strategy. Excuse me. A small step that everyone can do, even if you're a white belt. We know statistically, because there are people who do these statistics and pull apart hundreds upon hundreds of black belt elite level matches, that
Yeah, this is a good point.
the person who scores first, 90, I could bring it up on my phone, maybe we'll link that as well, 90 whatever percent of the time, wins the match.
I think it's first 2 points is 80-something%, and whoever scores a guard pass wins 92%.
That's a separate, but the guard pass only gets scored 0.6% of the time. So we need to, that's like,
Either way.
you need to look at both those statistics.
Yeah, either way. Point is,
Okay,
if you
so
score
whoever
first, you win a lot.
Generally, if you score first, you win a lot. So that tells us, don't wait. Don't let your opponent go first to their best position. So, practical thing you can do. Identify your best positions. Maybe close guard, maybe Z guard for me, bomber guard, as an example, top position. And if you have no other strategy for a match, the only strategy you really need, the one strategy you really need is, how do I get to this position before my opponent gets to this? And that's what you can start to mind map.
Yep.
So you can sit down and think, for me, as an example, what if I want to pull guard? Okay, I want to pull guard. What do I need to pull guard? What do I need to pull guard?
Grips.
Contact.
Okay. Well, contact.
How do I get my grips before he gets his grips or before he shoots? Once I've identified the grips I want to use, I identify how I get them. Once I've identified how I can get the grips, then I identify how I pull to my position. As, you know, being a guard, notorious butt scooter, guard puller. Murray, being a top player, might be, how do I get to the arm drag single leg or whatever it is. I think a practical step you could do even as a white belt is think, where do I want to be? And maybe as a white belt in 2 years' time, where you want to be now will be different to them, but that's okay. You got to start somewhere. All right, where do I want to be? Where do I feel most comfortable, like I have the most chance to submit this bloke or to control this individual or woman? How do I get the grips necessary for that? How do I get there? Because if you get there first, you give yourself by far the most chance of winning that match. If we're talking, you know, competition jiu-jitsu, which for a moment we are, we can get back to the other stuff in a minute. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but that's something that
No, it's like the very, I mean, it's strategy, yes, but it's also the very beginning of what I would just term game planning.
100% game planning strategy is.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. And it goes to the example that I was giving before, because my happy place, I know if I get to close guard and they're not on the scoreboard, then I've got a real high percentage chance of winning this match. What I recognize within that idea, though, is if I went too hard too early in that first minute, there's a good chance I'm going to blow my legs out. Yeah, so a little kind of subset within that idea was that I need to make sure I pick the moment. So the focus for the first 30 seconds or a minute was just about making the fight, the physicality of the fight be the right way. So picking the time with that. So break posture, break posture, break posture. All right, now we can go. Because a lot of closed guard attacks require you to open up in some way. And I know if my legs are shut, no one's passing, obviously. But I want to open my legs on the right terms. So that, I agree 100% with that. And at the start, when I first started competing, I knew closed guard was where I wanted to be and I had a good shot at getting trying, but I didn't really know how to get there. The idea of actually a technically developed guard pull wasn't even a thing 20 years ago. You just...
Was pulling guard even a thing 20 years ago?
Well, it was. But it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't super technical, I don't think. Or maybe it was and I just didn't notice. But now the whole idea and the concept of guard pulling is something that's really very specific to exactly the guard that you want to play, which way your partner's standing, the grips that you might like. There's all these different ways that can change the way that you do it. So, kind of carrying on your point, if you are a guard puller, you can look at how it's being done by the best guys and identify the guard that you like to play and then look at the way that they're doing it. Then when you can get back on the mat, you've already got a bunch of grip sequences sorted out and ready to go. And if you're a top player, you can do exactly the same thing.
You know, like segue, the 4 people that I've enjoyed watching most have all been, you can see they all prefer the takedown, but at a certain point, and I can't tell what that point is in their head or from a strategy perspective, other than they've just decided, I'm going to be first again. They were very comfortable chopping and changing between pulling and taking down and pulling and taking down, and they always seem to be successful with them.
I think, both Marcelo and Hodger are great examples of people that are
he's
successful with
Jacare, Galvao.
Take down or pull.
Yeah,
I think
takedown or pull.
I think if you've identified that you're a takedown artist, I think the reality is that you have a harder job.
Yeah.
So you need to put a little bit more time into your strategy, or maybe be a little bit more aware that the majority of people are going to look to pull, and pulling guard isn't that hard as opposed to a good takedown.
Yeah.
So developing a game to nullify the guard pull.
That's hard,
Nullify
man,
the grips,
because
nullify, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're a takedown artist, you've got a harder job than a guard puller.
It's been
grip
made-
sit,
Or-
then take down rather than just grip sit.
It's been made
Exactly.
a little bit easier recently by the change in the rule set of having to have. So now you can score the takedown while they're pulling guard. So if they don't successfully basically get their butt to the floor before you
Catch or
sweep the
kick.
leg, catch it, whatever it might be, then they still get takedown points. Whereas previously it'd be as long as they start pulling guard before you action your takedown, then there's no score. So they've made it a little bit easier. They've given the takedown guy a bigger window to try to score, which I'm a guard guy, and I actually like that rule. I think it's making the standing fight much better all round, and it's forcing me as a guard guy to get much better at my guard pulls, making sure that I'm pulling guard in a way that never gives this guy a shot. But of course it's easier because the takedown is scoring points, right? So it's much easier for someone to get to somewhere that doesn't score than it is for somebody to get the score. But yeah.
So just my point is, it's not enough to work on your takedowns. You must work on your anti-guard pulling as well.
Yep.
Or you're taking advantage of guard pulling.
Yep.
Because I think, at least from my experience, I'm sure most people would agree that the majority of competitors will pull.
Yep.
Even top players. You know, a lot of the time it'll be pull to a half guard sweep and then they'll start passing.
Yep.
Or something. You know, it would be a pull sweep game.
I'd be interested to see the stats on that. I would.
It happens to
There's
me a
going to
lot.
be a change as you move through the ranks. We know that. Through the weights. We know that the smaller weights, it's a battle to get to guard first, which is an interesting idea.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't seen the stats, and I was surprised by how prevalent guard passing was when we did see the stats through the lighter weights. But that said, that could be the result of pull, sweep, pass,
Well, if someone
or the other person pulls, they
Yeah.
pass. So it's hard to know, but
successful passes doesn't really
Tell you.
say anything about who's trying to get to so you see the lighter weights, it's much more prevalent double guard pull and then them trying to skirt around the penalties. Like, you know what I mean? That happens way more at the lower weights than the higher weights.
to the point where we see double DQs. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't see that at the higher weights, which suggests that the lower weights, there's actually a fight to see who gets to be on bottom. Whereas the heavyweight guys, my guess would be, without seeing stats, that most of the time whoever gets on top wins by virtue of weight.
Yeah, it
You
can
definitely
be-
see less guard pulling as the weights get very heavy.
Yeah.
But
Unless you get really
it's-
dynamic guys.
Marigali fights at 94 or 99.
Guys like Pachetra and guys like
Pachetra,
Hodge
yeah.
they don't give a shit whether they're top or bottom.
Hodger definitely. Hodger pulls guard and closes his legs around you, your girlfriend, and your mum at the same time. So. It's got legs for days.
He does have a leg for days.
Pillar 2.
We finished with pillar 1.
Well, pillar one can go for we can go a long time on that one, but I think most of it is, we can dive deeper on some of the points, but most of it is about trying to actually get your mental game, the theory of jiu-jitsu.
And I'll just stress again, if you get burnt out on the theory, if you get burnt out on the strategy, if you get burnt out on the analysing matches, just sit down and enjoy a lifestyle documentary.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that, man, like if I want to get G'd up for a comp class or a training session, I go to Flow Grappling and I watch Road to Worlds.
Yep.
And I just watch the Elite Academies training for Worlds, and I'm G'd. I'm ready to. I mean, obviously as a coach, I pick up a lot of good training strategies as well. That gets me really in the jiu-jitsu frame of mind.
I was just going to say conceptually as well, like something that I've found really helpful is writing down each position and then just writing down what my job is from there.
Yep.
That's really good. Let's give us an example.
It might be mount. I split mounts into
Can
three
we
areas.
make you give us an example of position you never use?
No. Like I split mounts into three areas: low, middle, and high. So if we're just saying middle, which I think most people would consider normal mount, just sitting on the hips.
Yeah, normal mount, but we're not talking about whether it's good or bad. It's just normal.
Yeah.
Common. We'll call it common.
Yeah, common, the common man's mount.
Yeah.
My first job is to make sure that my weight's not through my hips, so I'm squeezing my legs. So I might write things like squeeze knees, squeeze feet, so that I remember it's top and bottom, not just one or the other. I'll mention where my hands need to be, so my most common grip is controlling the wrists and putting them on their chest.
Yep.
And that's about all it really needs.
Yeah, that's quite good. I think that feeds into the matrix spreadsheet that you can use as well.
It does, yeah.
Which maybe Dave can talk about the matrix spreadsheet. But just before that, this also does go back though to picking a style that's suitable for your body type. I don't play middle mount hardly at all. I only play middle mount if the person underneath is really not that good.
Yeah,
I'll almost always play high mount with spine control.
Yeah.
Almost always. Or I'll skydive it.
I mean, I've been there and it's brutal. Skydive, I personally, from being underneath, don't find it to be that threatening and or hard to.
I mean, you're on the mount.
Well, let's step back on that though. So skydiver's mount is almost entirely about consolidating and maintaining. It's not an attacking position. I think that's one of the reasons why it doesn't feel threatening. If the guy on top knows what they're doing, it's very hard to escape if they know what they're doing. But high mount is the one where the threats come from. If someone gets high on you and they know what they're doing,
Having said that, no-gi, my Americanas, head and arm, attacks for the back, cutting arm bars, all that kind of stuff comes from low mount.
From low mount.
Start there.
From,
Start there, yeah, because you get.
It's interesting. I take that all from high mount.
I end up in high mount,
Exactly.
but but the attack starts, the separation of the arm
The
starts
isolation of the upper body.
because I've gone low mount first. Otherwise, if I climb high, I find I can't. But just quickly, what I was going to say, the reason I choose middle mount mostly, except for no-gi and or particularly if the person's explosive, I'll choose something different initially. But I will move there because it allows them to move, and the knee squeeze, the leg squeeze in, allows me to stay attached to them while they move. But I want them to move. I want them to start to try and escape, because that's what opens them up to the attacks that I choose to do. So my deliberate purpose in being there is not to pin them,
I think
but to have movement.
just before we get bogged down in that,
1 second. Sugi, come here.
Murray's mount is pretty goddamn good. But one of my favourite quotes in life and jiu-jitsu from Musashi, you must understand there's more than one way to the top of the mountain. So before we get bogged down in whose mount strategy is best, they all work and they're all good.
Yeah.
And they all have their positives and they all have their negatives.
Yeah.
You've got to find what works best for you. You've got to be able to use them all, actually. But then
High mount is definitely the hardest to escape from.
Best
For me.
hardest to attack from.
Escape from.
Sorry.
For me.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah. I think it's the hardest to escape from for everyone.
I would agree with that. I think there's a, we can go down the mountain path for all day on that, but we'll put that aside for now.
So the point was that in terms of having like something concrete to do, Just start with positions, write down what your understanding of that position is, like basic principles, use your weight, close the distance, keep my knees squeezed,
Yep.
hips off their hips, hands on their hands. And then what are my submissions from there? How do I make that happen? What are my transitions from there? How do I make that happen?
Yep.
And then to analyze a step further, the matrix, approach.
Yeah, so the matrix we built, Cam and I built it, it's a long time ago, man, like at least 15 years ago, which is basically a spreadsheet laying out all the positions. So you've got your, let's say, for example, you've got mount. So you've got your attack from mount, your transition from mount, and your escape from mount. So it looks at the top side of it and the bottom side of it. Then you got the same thing from side control, guard, et cetera, et cetera. So you map out all the positions, how they connect with each other. And one of the interesting things about it is a lot of the time we think that we've got a fairly decent understanding of all the main positions in jiu-jitsu, and then you sit down and you start mapping it out and you realize, man, I don't have anything to do with.
Exactly.
There's all these blank cells. So whenever I'm getting the students to fill it out, the number one thing that I'm telling them, obviously aside from just start filling this out, is that if you don't know what to do from there, leave it blank. Don't put in what you think you should be good at. Just put in what you actually do, and you'll be surprised how many blank cells there are and what we actually need to work on. And that suggests that when we're rolling in the gym, or we're doing in a particular position where we don't know what the answer is just move it around until something happens. And that might be good, it might be bad, but we don't know.
Even as a black belt doing an exercise like that, I've found myself writing down things in those, not in a matrix format, but writing things down where it might be an escape from mount. And I'm like, I'd do this. And I'm like, hang on a second. You're writing that just because
I think that's what the answer
you
should be.
need to write something down there, but I've never done that escape in my life. You
Yeah.
know? So being true to yourself and leaving it blank and accepting that you suck in that area is good.
This leads me to a point I think is really important, and it goes back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is if you're trying to build strategy, a personal strategy, one of the things that you need to actually do is analyze your own game. And it can be really easy to be really resistant to watching your own footage because it depends. I know a lot of people who are really high level who fall into this category, which is they look at their own footage and all they see is the things that they fucked up. All they see is the mistakes. And a lot of time you're like, I hate watching my own footage. But regardless, if you can make yourself watch it, you've got to be really honest with yourself about the areas that you can improve on. You've got to be really honest with yourself about the things that you're doing well. But you've got to be really, really clear about where the mistakes are. Otherwise, how are you going to get the absolute most out of your training if you're not identifying the problem areas? So this requires you to be on the actual mat in terms of building, like to train the physical skills, but in terms of identifying them, the easiest thing to do, I think, to get really good really fast is identify your worst position, the one that you're getting submitted from the most, fix that. Identify the position that you spend the most of the time in attacking in, not necessarily successfully attacking, but attacking in, and then get better at that. Yeah, because if you can get higher conversions at your strong position and you can get out more at your worst position, then you're going to win more, period. So you've got to work at both ends.
That's a really good strategy to build a strategy for strategizing. No, I mean, because the general, often people are like, I've got to get better at my bad stuff. That's true. But you also got to get better at your good stuff.
Yep.
It goes back to the whole 80-20, like where does most of your results come from?
Yep.
You know, you need to, if you have a great, whatever, let's say stick to the close guard analogy, get better. Get even better at close guard. Identify all the ways they could potentially counter your close guard and have an answer to all of them.
Yep.
And I don't think that process ever stops or should stop. And I mean, you might change. Like blue belt, I played De La Riva mostly. Purple belt, I don't remember. Reverse De La Riva mostly. Brown belt, all of a sudden I was a footlocker and everyone knew me as a footlocker. Black belt, footlock and close guard. But my point is, like, I didn't just be like, oh, I'm good at that, so I'll stop.
No, it makes no sense at all.
No, I want to get better at it because, you know, that's already your natural advantage.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to get.
Usually what people are really good at blue belt. So if you were to go back and look at competition footage of Marcelo or Marigali or any of the guys that we've been talking about, I guarantee you're going to see
Nucleus.
All the stuff that they're doing now, you're going to see them doing that at, not all the stuff, but The stuff that they were doing at Blue Belt, they're going to be doing that later on. But they're going to be doing more stuff. Their game is going to become more well-rounded. So it's not just going to be a butterfly guard arm drag to the back. They're going to have a closed guard. They're going to have a guillotine. They're going to have a single leg. They're going to have, it becomes more well-rounded. The stuff that we're really good at early on is usually the stuff that we're really good at later on, but we've just added more stuff that connects directly to those positions. One of the things I think that's probably...
think if you're IBJJF, the only exception is the leg lock game, because at blue belt-ish, maybe purple belt, you don't put much time into it.
Yeah.
And then once you get
That's
pro brown belt, you
weakness
start.
you'd have to, particularly if you went sub only, you'd have
Depends
to.
on your gym too.
That's why I said IBJJF. That's completely different. Yeah, I mean, this is complete another topic, but I don't understand why you can't knee bar and toe hold at blue belt.
I agree.
Like they're not that dangerous. They're not dangerous. Like, I mean, if you don't tap to an armbar, you're going to bust your arm. You don't tap to a toe, you're going to bust your ankle or your knee. Like, it's the same. There's nothing magical about those positions in the slightest. I mean, you could argue that heel hooks are slightly more dangerous than most, but apart from that, most things are pretty much even in terms of the level of danger.
Yeah. There's definitely... Yeah,
But that's a whole other subject.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole. So I think we've covered the first side, which is staying in the game, doing everything that you can to actually get better at jiu-jitsu that doesn't require you to physically be on the mat. There's definitely more depth that we could go into, but pillar 2.
Pillar 2 was develop yourself physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Murray's the one most qualified to speak about this, but I guess it's a good time. Just give me 2 seconds. I'll lead you in. I'll lead you in, bro. It's a good time to rehab some of those injuries if you have them. So, for example, I've been training and competing with a torn flexor tendon in my elbow, and the time off gripping gis has given me a lot of time in conjunction with my physio, my AP, exercise physiologist, to start to rehab that. At the same time, go back and listen to the podcast with John Sharp, and he talks a lot about, and so did Murray with his chair analogy, stool analogy, identifying the parts, leaving the mental game aside, identifying the parts of your physical attributes, preparations, abilities that are lacking the most.
Yeah.
Maybe put a little bit more work into them. But I'll say this one thing, and I say this about everything to do with jiu-jitsu. Most of you aren't pro. Most of you don't have to do this for a living. So make it fun. Yeah?
Yep.
There's no point. There's a million things I could do for cardio, base cardio, for example. Run is one. I fucking hate running. See how much running I do? None. I ride a bike because I enjoy it. If there's not some level of enjoyment, if it's absolute torture every single time, you won't stick to it. You'll find ways to torture yourself and you'll enjoy the Hurt Locker from time to time. But if it's always something you hate, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's the same with jiu-jitsu. When people come to me and they go, man, I'm really stale in my jiu-jitsu and, I don't feel like I'm getting better or this is not working and they're really bummed. You get people really bummed. I always ask them, why'd you start jiu-jitsu? And they usually give me, I want to learn something or I want to get better or I want to defend myself or... I'm like, really? Because you could have done judo, wrestling, Krav Maga, whatever. Why'd you stick to jiu-jitsu? And usually because after the first class, they're like, man, this is fun. Don't forget to enjoy what you're doing. Come to jiu-jitsu, enjoy being on the mat with your teammates, enjoy being on the mat and learning and developing and take the pressure off yourself. Have fun. And I feel kind of the same with strength and conditioning. There's parts we have to do that suck, but if you pick something that you really hate, you ain't going to stick to it.
Yep.
But Murray will be more scientific. That's totally emotional opinion there.
Well, I'm going to kind of stay along the same line slightly. I think if you want more information on the how to, just go back to the first podcast and or contact John or me, maybe. But what I did want to bring it back to is the first thing.
We'll link you guys in the description.
Yeah, sure. The first thing that I said early on, which was that Dave and I discussed that jiu-jitsu is a trigger for us to want to do more, and that means being active in jiu-jitsu. So if we go to the first point and you keep your mind active, then maybe that'll spur you on to being able to actually implement some other physical activity to support your return, whether it's from injury or during this time. But for me personally, the biggest upset during all of this was just, well, apart from obviously it being epically stressful, having to close your business and all that kind of stuff, and being at home with all the kids.
This is recorded.
It's the, It's just the change in structure. That there was all of a sudden no structure. Something you don't have deadlines on a daily basis or weekly basis to get certain things done, or hey, my class is at 6 o'clock, or this is when I roll, or any of that kind of stuff. So you don't have anything to build more structure upon or build more activities upon. So the first thing I would suggest is if you're someone like Linc, and I know a few guys from the Bentley Club who are like this, who have previously done a lot of cycling, they've trained for triathlon before, or they've been more into kettlebells or weightlifting or whatever it may be, they've relatively easily fallen upon that as another form of activity, another form of strength and or conditioning. But those who struggle with normal gym activity or normal exercise and came to jiu-jitsu because it was cerebral and it was fun, but it really made them think, which is one reason I love it. You need to
Suggesting I don't think through jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, you can do that. The one thing I will say is one reason I love kettlebells and weightlifting in particular, but I use the same mentality when I row or when I run or when I skip or anything. It's a chance for me to attempt to experience flow by trying to be as present as possible and do it as whatever that activity is as well as possible. That's by the by, but I think the first and most important thing to actually begin to become physically active is start, but how to start, you got to pair it to something. If you're trying to form a habit, you have to have a trigger for the habit, and the trigger for us has been jiu-jitsu, but without that gone, what are you going to do? So replace it with something. When I wake up, I will, and that's when you go and exercise. Or after lunch, I will, and that's when you go and exercise. Whatever it may be, after I've played with the kids for an hour, but there needs to be something that is going to happen every day that you can attach your physical activity to. Otherwise, I can imagine a lot of people, it'll get to kind of like 6 o'clock at the end of the day, and they're just like, still haven't done it. Fuck it, I'll do it tomorrow.
I think you have to be really disciplined about that.
Well,
and if you get to midnight and you're like, man, I got to go to bed, I've got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, but I haven't done my thing. Too bad. You got to do your thing.
Yeah, but that's the thing with building habits and attaching it to something, is that it removes the need for willpower and discipline, because it's per se. I mean, you're being disciplined, but you're taking the energy and pressure off. I got to do this because it's just, I brushed my teeth. After doing that, I exercise. And
I'll give you a little example. Sorry to interrupt, Linc.
I'll just interject for 2 seconds. I'm going to leave you boys to chat for a sec. I'll be back.
Ciao.
So one of the things that that I experience is patella tendonitis, not tendinosis. But the feeling of it's pretty the same. So, from kneeling a lot on the right knee, particularly because I'm always passing right leg forward, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I have to do static holds, like wall squats, every day, morning and night, for about a minute each time. And if I do that really, really regularly, then my knees almost all the time are really good. But if I stop doing that for a period of a few weeks, and I start to have problems with it again. So it's one of those things that I kind of group into the prehab sort of group of stuff.
Yeah.
That if I do them regularly, then I don't have a problem with the thing that will become a problem if I don't do them. Hence prehab. And I've got an electric toothbrush and it buzzes every 30 seconds. So I literally, every morning and every night, when I brush my teeth, for the first minute, I do a wall squat. And then I do some stuff that opens up my shoulders for the last minute. So that happens every morning, every night without fail, because I brush my teeth every morning and every night without fail.
Because you've anchored it to something.
Yeah, and it doesn't take any more time. It takes a little bit more effort, but the little bit more effort is so minimal. It is really interesting though that there's still moments where there's part of me that's like, dude, you're so tired. Like, just don't worry about it. Just go. Like, there's that little part of my brain that's like, you dude, just go. And then the other part of my brain is like, what are you talking about? Like, it takes the same amount of time. Like, so anchoring it to something that is really stable is really important to get that little thing done. Because I recognized a while ago that if I have to make time to do a bunch of rehab stuff, it will happen for a while, but then one day something will happen where I'm rushing and it will take me away from that. And then maybe the next day I do it, but maybe not, but then something else, and eventually it falls away. And the things that we will keep doing are the things that we enjoy doing, because the priority is to get to the gym and get on the mat. The priority is not to do the things around that allow us to keep us on the mat as far as our body goes. So I agree. I think the anchoring is really strong. But I think we've also got this idea of two different kind of personality types, or kind of characterological states, where some people will really easily go, I've made a decision that I'm going to do this, and that's just what I do. And then some people will wrestle with it, will struggle with it. And I run into this with people that want to compete, but they've never done it before, or they have done it a couple of times, but it's really scary for them. And so there's always this procrastination around it. I'm like, well, the solution is really simple. Put your entry in and then don't think about it again. Yeah. Just put your entry in and just don't think about it again until we get to the point prior to that comp where we actually have to start thinking about it. But if you're going to, instead of driving yourself crazy thinking about it for 2 months from when the rego's open, just put your entry in, and then you don't need to think about it for the next however long until you actually start doing some specific training for it. Now, depending on how big the comp is, that might start earlier. But that requires you to be disciplined about your thinking, because you're going to end up in a situation where your mind's going to go back to that, because, again,
we've looked at this. I'm pretty sure we looked at the same article. It was a few years ago, but it was decision-making fatigue. And it sort of is part and parcel of the whole being disciplined thing, I think, is having too much to think about. Which comes back to the whole idea of what I said before, and the examples you were giving. Whether you're good at it or not, just anchor it to something. Like anyone who appears disciplined in anything, in terms of setting up a habit, all they've done, whether they are aware of it or not, is said that at this time or after this activity or before this activity, I will do blah. In terms of you guys doing something actually, if you haven't been doing something physical, check out the previous podcasts and understand that the first place, start gentle, start slow, particularly if you've been sitting on your ass for 4 weeks now.
Ivan.
And understand also, this is by the by, but on the same topic, when you get injured, it's almost always an increase in intensity or an increase in
load,
volume.
Or an increase in stupidity.
So volume or intensity.
Well, that leads to the other two.
So people they'll go away for a week on holiday, do no jiu-jitsu, come back, get straight back into their 7 classes.
Probably
and
sometimes more too, because they're feeling fresh.
And on their 4th or 5th class, shit explodes. And they're like, why did that happen? I've been doing this, because that week off was enough for your body to feel like the return week was an increase in volume and intensity. So take it super slow, treat yourself like a grandpa or a nana. And something that I have learned the hard way multiple times, because I'm a bit dumb, is that it's very easy. I find it very easy to burn myself out, because I start to do something, I feel good, and I do more, and I do more, and I do more, and then I'm cactus. So the general rule that I live by now is that if I do something today, I need to be able to do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And particularly when I start. It's a pretty good rule of thumb, I think. Particularly when I start. So I will start at a level that I know I'm not going to feel any remorse for in terms of pain or fatigue the next day, so that I can walk back out to the garage and hit it again and just be like, well, that was easy.
And to put that in context, that's going to change for different people. You're 40 and got 3 kids. I'm 40 and I've got a kid. And
if you're 21, you can do a bit more.
Exactly. You're 21, you recover really well, you barely need any sleep, all that sort of stuff. But so that's going to vary. And I think it's probably really important to make sure that you're not measuring what's reasonable for you against somebody else who's not you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that will your, I suppose, life structure in terms of you being a single male in his early 20s. You're not going to go out to the garage and do a 10-minute workout. You could probably punch out 45 minutes and then wake up the next day and be like, yep, I'm going to do that again. So it's a bit of
Yeah.
experimentation.
One, I think that goes back, and this might seem simple, but it's worth repeating, especially for the younger, less experienced crew, about starting gentle and not judging yourself by someone else. Don't look at your favorite jiu-jitsu athlete and their strength and conditioning routine and think that that's what you need to do to improve, because A, you're not them. B, you don't have a decade and a half of training behind you and a base already. C, you're probably on a different diet to them. And it's very easy to try and emulate your heroes and actually get negative results, whether it be deconditioning or injury or whatever comes from that, or just mental fatigue, it's so tiring, you're just like, I can't be asked doing this now. You need to start by recognizing who you are and where you're at right now.
Yeah. I think I'm looking at the clock that's ticking over right now.
So what was the third?
No, that's what I was going to touch on. What was the third?
Oh, I thought you meant your biological clock.
Yeah, that one too.
So I thought that was going.
And I'm going to jump online and research some supplements from Mexico.
Third pillar was, if you can, which you can't always do, try to do some jiu-jitsu-esque movements. And there's plenty of stuff online. We've produced quite a bit. If you're part of our team, you will have seen many drills. Try to improve the quality of your movement along jiu-jitsu planes while you're off, if you can. I think, depending on how long you've been training, as to where this might go in order of importance. Like if you're a white belt, this can get you a lot of results. Or if you're a blue belt, this can get you a lot of results. If you're a brown belt or a black belt, well, you've been moving like this for 8, 10, 15 years, you maybe are not going to get the same amount of result from it.
Yep.
But
it's also something that people might, like you were saying before, find fun, because a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of people who started jiu-jitsu did it because they didn't like the traditional methods of exercise. So some general ideas, obviously, like there's the solo drills we've been putting up. There's a kabillion on YouTube by others. Am I allowed to plug my lame, tiny YouTube account? There's an infant development warm-up that I do a lot before I wrestle. I often used to do it before I did strength.
When you said infant, I assume you meant for infants.
Infant development, in that the movements are based on infant development.
Gotcha.
The progressions of,
Yep.
and it's very clear the steps that it goes through.
Yep.
It's incredibly interesting. It's helped me, like from a rehab perspective, helped me teach people how to reconnect to different segments of their body. It's also helped me teach people, like, improve coordination with people. So it's
what's
like
your
it's
what's your YouTube account called before we?
just look up my name, Murray Balland, and
We'll link it up.
so there's that stuff, infant development, movement-based patterns. There's a primal move, which was popular a while ago.
Yeah.
But it's animalistic style movements, but when I watch them, a lot of them are heavily based on the same software development.
Gymnastic and natural.
Gymnastic and natural is another one. So yeah, investigate that stuff, and then you can put it together yourself.
Yep.
There's a guy called MMA Leech, has a YouTube account called MMA Leech. He put out a gymnastic and natural half-hour workout recently.
another really good one that I know quite a few guys are using, and we used when we were in Vegas with Troy Skidmore from Limitless and that crew, is Yoga for BJJ. It's a really good app.
Yep.
You can get a progression workout of the day, and it'll take you through the progression, and that was quite useful.
Yeah, to be honest, there's
It's a
so
good time
much
to
good.
work on. For instance, we have discovered that you do inversions and whatever you want to call them, bolos, cabrini rolls, anything like that. You do them really easily, and maybe us not so much.
Which is interesting considering how much my actual guard inverts a lot.
Yeah.
But I still, when I sit down and try to do that as a practice warm-up movement, the mechanics are not as smooth as I expected them to be.
Yeah, so picking some of the yoga for BJJ or gymnastic and natural movements or whatever they may be that will supplement or support the average parts of your game, so that you can, begin to be an upside down bendy if you want.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't want. I mean, if you have that mobility, if someone does unfortunately put you into a bad position, then you've probably got less chance of being injured, which, just while we're on that, just to clarify what mobility means, because people take it many different ways. Would you agree, Murray? It's not simply flexibility. It's range of motion and having strength through that range of motion.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's
It's not just being a bendy freak.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's important.
We're beginning to touch on mobility and stability, and
Which is probably, I mean, every second thing we talk about is like, that's a conversation for another time, but that is a conversation for another time. So we got the 3 pillars. First one is keep your head in the game, and a lot of that's going to be working the more, for lack of a better phrase, intellectual sides of jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
So study matches. Look at the best guys. Don't just watch the match and go, oh man, 6 sweep, but try to look at the strategy that's actually at play, like the meta game that's happening, and how these guys are coming into it. And ideally, if you can find some, because there's a bunch of them out there on YouTube, and again, one of the best ones at the moment is Keenan breaking down his own match with Marigali. And we'll link that up. We'll link up Marigali's interview as well. So you can see from both perspectives what they were trying to do. I've definitely had matches as well where I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to try to submit everyone. I don't care about points. And sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. But it's really interesting to try to understand the way that the best guys in the world think about jiu-jitsu. Take some time to map out your own game. So for our guys, you can use the matrix. For any guys who are not from dominance, it's not that hard to make your own spreadsheet that does that pretty well, and start to try to understand some of the concepts of jiu-jitsu. We also talked about mapping out your own personal game and looking at body types.
And understanding how to start the match ahead.
Yeah.
Taking the time to work out how to get to your best positions before your partner does.
If you are competing, that is vital.
Yeah.
Vital. And then pillar number 2, basically we're talking about staying active and doing activity that supplements your jiu-jitsu for when you return and makes your base stronger for when you return. So if you've got injuries, rehab them and keep prehabbing them. Try to build up that foundational fitness or conditioning that we talked about in the first podcast with yourself and John Sharp. And then pillar number 3 was try to do what you can. I actually want to touch on that really quickly, was that most guys have been training a long time, so we've been doing jiu-jitsu, like I've been doing it over 20 years. And to be honest, I'm not that jazzed about doing a bridge or a hip escape at home. I've done thousands of them over the years. But when I was a white belt, I'd done only a handful, and most of them were not very good. And because the warm-up is happening so fast, it's very rare that your coach will stop you and fix it up. We're pretty anal about that stuff in dominance because we understand how fundamental it is for all the other stuff that happens after it. But if you're a white belt, you're probably not bored of bridges yet, and your bridges probably suck. They're probably dog shit. And the same with all the other fundamental movements. So
Even
take
your hip escape
your time.
probably sucks, to be honest.
Yeah, like all your fundamental movements are probably somewhere between poor and absolute rubbish. So spend some time on them. So when you get back up on the mat, those things are dialed in, and then you'll find that all the stuff that is built of those movements actually works a lot better. All your escapes are built of those movements. So you looked like you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say super briefly, if you're an on-top guy or a passer, like takedowns, maybe some of the movements you want to choose are heavily leg-based, like changing levels, staying low while passing, that kind of stuff. And if you like playing guard, something I noticed with some of the drills Linc had been putting together is that my ab conditioning is woeful. So hammer some of that. Yep.
I reckon there's a fair bit there. So, guys, hopefully you're taking care, staying safe, staying healthy, and we'll see you at the next one.
Cool. Ciao.
And we won't have to cry.